I probably started keeping score when I was a younger kid, 7 or 8 years old. So obviously it was rudimentary back then. Now that I need to keep score for a living, I'm definitely an information guy. I try and pack as much information into that little box as possible.
My approach to scorekeeping hasn't really changed over the years. I just keep a very simple book.
Well, as I moved along and you became a professional and the scorecard was more than just folly, it was really important for your job, especially when I was a newspaper writer. You had to be able to recall exactly what happened at a specific moment.
I can't really say that any changes in the rules of Major League Baseball have changed the way that I keep score.
I keep such a simple scorebook that changes in rulings and that sort of thing really doesn't change what I do in the scorebook.
I mean, the shift has almost rendered some of the old-time numbers completely obsolete. I mean, Didi Gregorius could be on the second base side of the bag and field the ball and get the score at 6-3, but it's really not a 6-3. So I'll put a 6, and then in parentheses I'll put a 4, which means that Gregorius made the catch on the second base side of the bag. That's probably the biggest change I've made with the way the game has changed because of all the shifts.
One of the only reasons that I would go back and look at a book day of would be if Jack and I are sitting on the set and I have to look at a certain play or sequence of things that happen as they relate to the highlights. The only other time is if I'm doing play-by-play. It's advantageous for me to look and see what they've done in previous games to know how that might affect the game in hand.
I consider the book of the current season that I'm working on vital. When we do our pregame and postgame, I like having that book just off to the side. It's not usually on camera, but I definitely refer back to that book because even though I could spit out a stat like a guy is 3 for his last 23, I like to be able to go back and see, okay, where did that streak start? Oh yeah, it was that at-bat where he got fooled on a slider and he struck out, and just little tidbits of information like that. So I definitely use the book of the current season and go back and research that a lot.
My scorekeeping started when I was in Little League. Couldn't tell you, probably 7 or 8 years old is when I first started scoring games.
Well, I started keeping score when I was a kid. Right when I got into baseball, my dad taught me how to do it, and I was one of those kids who sat there and kept score of every single game that I watched on TV. And that took a lot of effort. I mean, you really have to hang in there for losing games. I just felt that even to this day, when I come to a game, if I don't keep score, I'm not as much into it as I would be if I kept score. You really have to lock in if you're keeping score. So in terms of how long I've been doing it, I guess I've been doing it since I was 9 years old, and I'm 54 now, so you do the math.
The first time I kept score was probably the first time I went to a Major League Baseball game with my mom and my brother, and I saw my brother doing it and wanted to know what he was doing. I was curious, and anybody who has an older brother or an older sibling, you sometimes try and just recreate or imitate what they're doing. So once I saw him doing it, I wanted to do it too.
My earliest memory of scorekeeping would probably be when my mom was keeping score for my Little League games.
When I was a kid and I started keeping score, I would actually create my own score sheet. But then when I would go to a game, I'd buy a scorecard and I would copy off of that. So it pretty much was my own invention, but off of what you could get in a scorecard at Yankee Stadium.
I wouldn't say that I imitate anyone else other than the way that my brother taught me, however many years ago that was. And it was a pretty simple, basic way. I think what I've done with scorekeeping since then is just made changes as they help me.
I guess if I had to say my scorekeeping style was patterned after anybody, it would be after the way my mom kept score for my Little League games.
I do get a chuckle out of some friends of mine in the press box who are big on having different colored pens for a hit and an out and are very artistic. I have my own artistic way of doing it. It might be a little messy sometimes, but I'm doing what works for me.
The 19-inning game was interesting because I only went to 15 innings in my book, and after that I decided, you know what, there is no more room. This is for the post-game show. I'll be able to wing it from there over the final 4 innings. So I made a few notes on the final 4 innings, but that was it.
Well, it was kind of fun to keep score of that because you wondered if it really kept going, how are you going to keep track? Because I only have 16 innings on my book. So that one went 19 innings. I squeezed the 17th and 18th inning into the side of the scorebook. But then once it got to the 19th, I was doing the game with Kenny. Kenny wrote out a whole nother sheet. I didn't want to do that. So I just took an index card and I kept the 19th on that, and I have that kind of in the same area as I do the whole game. So I need those index cards to tell me what happened in the 19th inning.
I've got a scorebook from Bob Carpenter, who produces it. He's one of the play-by-play guys for the Washington Nationals, and it ends after 15 innings. So I remember being on set with Bob Lorenz and saying, what's going to happen if we go past 15 innings? Now, there was no way that I was starting an entire new page and writing in all of the lineups for both teams. So what I did was just add a sheet of paper and kept the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th inning on this sheet of paper, as opposed to having to go back and do the whole thing. But it did create a little bit of a mess, but you figured out a way to get through it.